Styling forms with CSS is often a source of frustration for many designers, particularly those who are coming new to CSS. But I've developed some CSS styles which can create reliable, cross-browser and attractive styling for forms. Now in this example, I'm using the markup that we created in the last movie, where I've divided the form into field sets. And each form element has been given a name and an ID attribute, and is enclosed within its label. Notice here that I'm using the label for attribute to marry the label to its form input. I'm also deciding to wrap the text which is displayed for the label in a semantically neutral span tag, and we'll see how that's used a little bit later on. So first of all, let's save this file and hop on over into Firefox and see how the form looks with just the browser's default style and the global style sheet that we're using for these examples. So I'm going to preview this in Firefox. And as you can see, it's not a particularly attractive first result, with all of the labels running into each other across the page. But we can make this form look very attractive with CSS. So now I'm going to go back into the code editor. I've created some simple snippets of CSS code. The first is for the label. Now here, I'm using 3 rules. The first rule is a combined rule for both the label and the span, which we wrapped around our text. And here, I'm setting the label and the label span to display block, as opposed to its default behavior as an inline element. I'm also giving it a little bit of padding bottom of a flexible measurement of 0.25 em, just to give a little bit of spacing between our labels and our spans in the final design. I'm using floats to float each of the labels left and give it a width of 100%. But now I'm also floating the label span to the left and giving that a width of 45%. Notice also that I'm using text align right, so that the label text sits next to the label input. So let's save this file, swing back over into the browser and refresh and see what changes that CSS has made. Interesting, it's now beginning to take shape. So let's dive straight back into code and apply some styles to the inputs that sit inside these labels. Now there's a number of rules to look at here. The first is that I'm targeting inputs which only sit inside field sets. And you'll notice if I scroll down into the markup that each of the form elements is wrapped inside a field set to group it together logically. However, we have a submit button, and we're going to talk about styling of submit buttons later on in the chapter. But this has been wrapped inside a div, or division, and not inside a field set. So the rule, which I've created here, will only target inputs which are inside field sets and not inside divs. Inputs are floated right, given a specific width of 45%, and now I've also added pink border of 1 pixel. Now, we talked earlier on about dynamic pseudo-classes, and here I've added a hover state to those inputs where the border color changes to black, and I've also used a combined rule for the active and focus states where I change the border color to red, and we'll see that in action now when I save the file and switch back into the browser. Do a refresh to see those styles applied. And now, as we mouse over, the border color changes to black, and as we click, the border color changes to red.